Canada Royal Milk can only ship baby formula overseas, despite there is a domestic shortage. The shortage of infant formula in Canadian and American households was affected in 2022 and 2023, leading to a surge in formula prices. According to data from the Canadian Bureau of Statistics, between September 2022 and September 2023, the price of formula milk powder increased by over 20%, from $31 per can to $38 per can, an increase of $7. In February 2022, the milk powder production plant of Albert Nutrition in Michigan, USA, was closed after an FDA recall notice due to bacterial contamination in the milk powder products. The factory is responsible for producing one of the most popular infant formula brands in North America, Similac, and its withdrawal from the market has led to supply and price pressures. After the factory was closed for 4 months, the Canadian Department of Health issued a temporary policy to import a certain amount of milk powder from other countries, except for brands already available in the Canadian market. These imports include some new brands for the Canadian market. As Canadians, we need to better ensure cornerstone products like food and health products, and we do have the ability to produce these products domestically, said the Canadian Department of Health, which will continue to collaborate with manufacturers interested in producing infant formula in Canada. Royal Canadian Dairy is a factory located in Kingston, owned by the Chinese conglomerate Feihe International. The factory produces infant formula in Canada and ships it to China. Therefore, the Canadian government has the opportunity to sit down with the owner of the factory and the Chinese government in an attempt to negotiate a solution so that at least this Canadian-based factory can provide products to Canadians. The milk powder production plant invested by Feihe in Canada is called Royal Milk Company of Canada, and it is also the first and only infant formula milk powder production enterprise in Canada. In 2016, Premier Li Keqiang visited Canada and reached a series of investment agreements with the country. This also allowed Feihe to successfully establish a factory in Kingston, Ontario, with an investment amount of up to $332 million Canadian dollars. At that time, this cooperation was seen as a win-win move between China and Canada. On the one hand, the Canadian dairy supply mechanism's guarantee of the quality and price of cow and sheep milk is an important reason for attracting investment from Feihe. Canadian milk powder is rarely seen in the Chinese market due to the high prices of Canadian dairy products. Of course, there are also reasons for high prices. Canada's cows are prohibited from using artificial hormones and antibiotics, and globally, it is one of the few countries that adheres to this principle. In many countries, dairy farmers inject cows with a growth hormone, RBST, to increase production. For example, some farms in the United States are also doing the same. According to a 2007 study by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, approximately 17% of American cows receive this artificial hormone. Canada is very strict, prohibiting the injection of growth hormone into cows. In addition, every domestic milk powder sold in the Canadian market does not contain emulsifiers. During the construction of the factory, Feihe has brought 300 job opportunities to the Kingston area. After production, 277 new full-time positions will be established locally, and the entire industry chain can create over 1,000 positions for Canada. In September 2018, Canada reached a new North American Free Trade Agreement with the United States and Mexico. According to the new trade agreement, Canada has agreed to open up 3.6% of its domestic dairy market to the United States, restrict the production of infant formula and skim milk products, abandon the domestic dairy ingredient pricing system, and follow the pricing of the United States, ending the more competitive and low-cost raw material prices. According to the agreement, Canada is willing to restrict the export of infant formula and abandon the domestic pricing system for dairy ingredients. In addition, Canada's milk powder exports shall not exceed 13,333 tons in the first year of implementation of the agreement, 40,000 tons in the second year, and an annual increase of 1.2% thereafter. Milk powder exceeding the specified quantity is subject to an export tax of $4.25 per kilogram. This agreement disrupted Feihe's plan to produce milk powder in Canada and then export it back to China. In Feihe's original plan, out of 60,000 tons of annual production, 10,000 tons were sheep milk powder, which was not restricted by the new agreement. But if the remaining 50,000 tons of milk powder were to be exported to China as originally planned, 85% would exceed the limit. According to Canadian negotiators who learned from municipal officials in Kingston, Feihe's adjusted plan is to split 60,000 tons of milk powder in half, producing 30,000 tons of sheep milk powder. In this way, the export volume of milk powder will be within the limit specified in the new agreement. It is worth noting that apart from Feihe, there are basically no milk powder exporters in Canada. Most Canadians don't know that Canada is home to a large baby formula plant. However, all its products are shipped to China. The plant uses Canadian cow and goat milk. This is troubling for anyone who understands how the Canadian dairy sector works. Selling to China isn't really the problem. After all, China's melamine scare in 2008 made Canadian dairy products all the more attractive. It's hard to blame an industry for capitalizing on an opportunity. But this dairy is Canadian. Subsidizing and protecting our milk production to serve other markets isn't what supply management was designed to do when it was implemented more than 50 years ago. The milk sold to Canada Royal Milk should not only be off quota, but the facility should also be Canadian owned and operated, so some of the focus would be on the Canadian market. Canadians are still reliant on imports, despite the existence of Canada Royal Milk. Most ironic, due to trade barriers on both sides, the plant is only 30 kilometers away from the American border but can't ship products to the US. For Canadian consumers, having access to Canadian-made baby formula would be reassuring, but dairy farmers just don't think about the market that way. Money is money, and who's being fed is totally secondary. This is Canada's true baby formula problem. Canada Royal Milk has since said that it is currently going through a regulatory process to get its product into the domestic market. Canada Royal Milk will be able to sell products domestically once the regulatory process is complete and approvals granted.